can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What's up, Earth's and subscribers? It's Blerd Without Fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, I'll be breaking down Amazing Spider-Man number 14 by Zeb Wells, Michael Dowling, Kyle Holtz, Terry Dodson, and Ryan Stegman. The main thing I want to talk about here is why Ben Reilly, the Spider clone, who was once the one true Spider-Man and very recently was once again the one, quotey fingers, true Spider-Man, is trying to kill Peter Parker, and why his mission to kill Peter Parker is putting him on a collision course with the X-Men. To dig into this, you have to go back to Zeb Wells' Volume 5 run on Amazing Spider-Man, which started with Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 75. In that issue, Maxine Danger brought on Ben Reilly, once again, the former Spider clone and one-time Spider-Man, to represent the Beyond Corporation as the one true Spider-Man, even owning the intellectual property rights so that no one else could actually legally present as Spider-Man. That said, Ben Reilly, despite Maxine Danger's best efforts, kept getting closer and closer and closer to the absolute truth behind what was going on at Beyond Corporation and why he shouldn't trust them. Even with his girlfriend, Janine Godby, being released from prison by the Beyond Corporation, nothing kept Ben from slowly learning what Maxine was secretly doing. That Maxine had been erasing Ben's memories of everything he'd ever done that might make him feel guilt or could compromise his being Spider-Man in the eyes of the public. Case in point, his being a clone and how he was created by the Spider-Man villain, the Jackal, the very same Jackal who was responsible for all that weird-ass Clone Saga BS from in the 90s. Even how the Jackal had repeatedly killed Ben over and over, recreating him time and time again to, quotey fingers, improve the cloning technique. Even his memories of being the Jackal for a brief time and creating clones of his own, all of that has been removed from his memory. Ben Reilly is a broken man, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, pretty much any way you slice it. He has died so many times to the point that his soul even became fractured, and that makes him incredibly malleable. And while Maxine often lied to Ben that she wanted him as Spider-Man because of his strong will, his determination, and good heart, it was more because they knew he'd make a better puppet. And in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 85 and 86, after Ben defeated Dr. Octopus, Doc Ock gave Ben a hard drive with all of Beyond Corp's files on them. Files that proved Maxine Danger was lying to him. And once Maxine realized Ben knew the truth, she had Ben's memories wiped yet again. But instead of removing just his memories of the truth, she wiped almost all of Ben's formative memories. His memories, or rather Peter's memories, of his childhood, his parents, Aunt May, Uncle Ben, all of it was destroyed from Ben's memory. Hence, why every time he had a memory of Uncle Ben or Aunt May or anyone else he was close to in life other than Janine Godby, he would always see a gaping hole where their faces would be. Even his own face is alien to himself sometimes when he looks in the mirror. Ben tried to get these memories back, and thanks to Maxine's influence, even fighting Peter Parker and trying to force him to give up his own memories using Beyond's technology. But Peter knew not to trust Beyond's methods, knowing they'd likely take advantage of the situation and compromise his secret identity once again. This led to them having a brawl for it all inside of Beyond Corporation that unleashed a dangerous mutagen that flooded the facility where Peter and Ben were facing off, and Ben ultimately fell into the mutagen and was believed to be dead. But Janine later found Ben buried beneath the rubble in the sewers under the Beyond Corporation, seemingly horrified by what she found. At first, it seemed like maybe he had come into possession of an alien symbiote, but this actually seems to be something way more dangerous. His new costume doesn't really change anything about his core power set. He still has the same exact powers as Spider-Man, but this suit, for whatever reason, it seems to almost make him even more angry than what he already was about his memories being stolen from him than ever before. He seems to be far more murderous and willing to kill than we have seen in the past. And the way the costume just kind of ebbs and flows around him and the kind of wavy smokiness of it, there's definitely something else going on with his costume, and he very likely has more powers and abilities than what we know at this time. That said, Ben's alive, but now he wants vengeance, especially against Peter Parker, who he believes is responsible for the void he feels in his mind and his lack of memories and soul. And now he's teaming up with the Goblin Queen, Madeline Pryor, someone who knows what it's like to be a clone and treated poorly, and together they plan to take back everything from those who stole their place in the world. Now, to do this, Madeline Pryor is giving Ben her near endless army of demons in limbo to accomplish their goals, something she's doing largely because she cannot be directly involved in Ben's war against Spider-Man because it was a part of the deal she made with Magic to take control of Limbo in New Mutants Volume 4, number 28. She can perform no act of aggression against Krakoa or the Earth dimension as a whole. Otherwise, Magic will take back the crown that she's given so freely to Madeline. But Maddie seems to be of the belief that Magic didn't truly trust her and gave her the throne of Limbo to get her quotey fingers out of the way for Cyclops and Jean Grey. Because Madeline, being a clone of Jean Grey, it's always kind of been a sticking point for Jean Grey. During Zeb Wells' Hellions number 4, it was revealed that one of the reasons that she wasn't allowed to be back wasn't necessarily so much because she was a clone, but also it may have had a lot more to do with the fact that it would have made Jean Grey incredibly uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, none of this is actually really true. Magic just didn't want the throne anymore, and Maddie's suspicions are little more than her past trauma playing tricks on her. Magic actually believes that Madeline Pryor can do the job and wants to give her an actual genuine shot at redemption. Maddie is just too blinded by suspicion and fear to see it. Regardless, Madeline Pryor wants to have a true soul, and the only way for her to get one is to take it from Jean Grey, but she can't attack Jean outright, otherwise she loses Limbo. Hence, why she's getting Ben to do it for her. As for Ben's girlfriend, Janine Godby, Madeline sees a kindred spirit in her and has also given Ben yet another weapon at his disposal, taking Janine Godby and using the Demon Sim's severed finger to unlock her potential as well, turning her into the demonically powered Hallows Eve. We don't really know exactly what it is she can do, but she kind of seems to be almost like a female version of Demogoblin. We don't really see her with a goblin glide or anything, but in some of the solicits, we do see her kind of floating around with fire all around her and, flaming pumpkins and things of that nature, so who knows? We don't really know what's going on here. All of this may seem incredibly out of character for Janine, considering the fact that for the most part, she's kind of been Ben's rock. She's been the one who has kept Ben grounded even through all the Beyond Corporation stuff and has probably been his most loyal ally on this, and that's kind of why she's doing what she's doing. While initially, Ben kind of scares her right now, the fact that she loves him so much, and he's taken on this mission to kill Spider-Man. At first, this terrifies her, but not so much because she's afraid of what it is he's going to do. She's more afraid of the fact that it doesn't bother her. Now, all that said, she's been struggling with trying to live a straight and narrow life. Now, for those unfamiliar, Janine Godby, whose real name is actually Elizabeth Tyne, she killed her father because he was abusive to her, and she finally had enough, and she murdered him. She went to prison for it and everything, but the Beyond Corporation had busted her out of jail. But now with Ben Reilly on the outs with the Beyond Corporation, they've changed the narrative on why Janine, quotey fingers, is actually out and about in the real world and not languishing in the raft or the Myrmidon somewhere. This has led to the authorities trying to track her down and bring her back into police custody. And when she discovers that the narrative has been changed and that no one is really going to give her a fair chance, even when she encounters a guy at a diner who seems like the nicest of people but is actually an undercover cop waiting to take her down, she realizes no one is going to give her a fair shake and has decided to throw in her lot with Ben and take control of her own narrative. Even though technically she's allowing Ben to take control of her narrative, but the reason why she's just being this way with Ben is because Ben is the one and only thing in her life that's ever been good, even with how scary he's being now. And while she wants to help Ben on his crusade to take down Peter Parker, the truth of the matter is she realizes she's just a normal human. She has no superpowers, but now she has superpowers thanks to Madeline Pryor. So with these superpowers, now calling herself Hallows Eve, which is kind of a dumb name, but well, whatever. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like all of Spider-Man's villains have cool names, but yes, Hallows Eve is kind of a silly name, even by Spider-Man standards. But together, Ben and Hallows Eve are going to take on the X-Men of Krakoa to get to Jean Grey, as well as steal Peter Parker's soul. Now, I know what some people are probably already thinking, what kind of a threat is a souped up Ben Reilly and a newly minted Janine Godby as Hallows Eve? What exactly are they going to be able to bring to the table that are going to allow them to even hold a candle, much less run roughshod over the X-Men? And the truth of the matter is they have magic on their side, at least in terms of Hallows Eve. Now, while Hallows Eve isn't necessarily an expert in how to use her newfound abilities, the truth is we've learned as recently as Immortal X-Men number 1 and 2 that magic is a huge blind spot for Krakoa. The former Black Queen, Selene, has even pointed out as much, and even Colossus's sister Magic has recognized this. Even Selene had to point out that when the Quiet Council of Krakoa had Apocalypse at their table, while they did have expertise in the mystic arts and magic, thanks to his knowledge of the matter, the truth is Selene knew more about magic than Apocalypse could have ever hoped to. And as she points out in Kieran Gillen's Immortal X-Men number 1, you are vulnerable to anyone with a grimoire and a bad attitude. And she also pointed out how during the Trial of Magneto event, when Wanda Maximoff unintentionally unleashed 3 magical kaiju on the island, the X-Men struggled to take them down. Even though they've handled giant monsters in the past with no problem, but those giant monsters weren't magic. These are. Not only that, with the inclusion of magic on the current X-Men roster, this brings the story arc that Vita Ayala put in place between Magic and Madeline Pryor to the forefront in what I would say is not the most major of Marvel crossover events, but definitely is a major crossover between Spider-Man and the X-Men, as well as making the story arc between Magic and Madeline Pryor that began in Vita Ayala's New Mutants number 25 through 28 that much more impactful. And when it comes to Ben Reilly's side of things, while we don't really know exactly how much more powerful he is now versus before, we do know that Beyond Corporation kept a lot of dangerous things, very wild, multiversal things inside of their facilities, so that unknown mutagen that got a hold of him in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5 number 93 could very well be something that is not of this earth. And who knows, it could even have some supernatural components to it that we haven't seen yet. And if Ben Reilly's new attitude is anything to go by, he very likely is bringing some bad intentions to the X-Men. And while Spidey may not be able to solo the X-Men anymore, there was once a time in the Marvel Comics universe where Spider-Man has been able to completely solo dolo the X-Men. And if Peter Parker could do it, there's not really anything saying that Ben Reilly couldn't do the same. So on top of the new powers that Ben has, I'm pretty sure Maddie has given him some extra tools to use against what are supposed to be her own allies. With Madeline Pryor's magic, they have already proven that they have the capability to do just that. For those who have been keeping up with Zeb Wells' Amazing Spider-Man up to this point, you probably may recognize a certain debt collector who has been hounding Peter Parker since Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 1. And while sometimes this debt seems ominous, it's actually for the medical bills that he racked up during Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 75, where he became toxically irradiated by the UFOs. This is what actually put him out of commission and led to Ben Reilly becoming the one true Spider-Man for a short while. And while there seems like there's some more ominous connections there, I don't know if we're ever actually going to learn the truth behind any of that, because the debt collector's soul has been stolen. Ben Reilly mercilessly beats him almost to death and takes him to limbo so that Madeline Pryor can take his soul as an experiment. And this is how they realize they're going to be able to steal both Jean Grey and Peter Parker's souls. By killing the debt collector, they learn that they can drink the souls of their victims who eat from the tree of exquisite liberation, which separates the person from their soul and allows Ben and Madeline to gain that person's memories, even feeling as though they've become that person. And now Ben's mission is to take on Krakoa, capture Jean Grey, and present her soul to the Goblin Queen of Limbo and kill Peter Parker to become the one true Spider-Man. It's a pretty fairly crazy story, but in a lot of ways, I do kind of understand where they're coming from here. I know a lot of people aren't crazy about the idea of Ben Reilly being a bad guy, but at the end of the day, what else is the guy gonna be? The trick with Ben Reilly, and what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that no one really ever buys Ben Reilly's books. When Ben Reilly has been Spider-Man, Spider-Man just kind of takes a bit of a dip. Well, yeah, sure, people bought his Spider-Man books early on, back in like the 90s or whatever, because they were curious about what was going on with the whole spider clone business. After all that kind of went away, you really weren't hearing anyone checking for Ben Reilly. Even when he came back as the Scarlet Spider, and while yes, those stories were cool, they weren't necessarily barn burners or just flying off the shelves. So at this point, they're actually taking a different pace with Ben Reilly, and if he doesn't work as a good guy for readers, they're trying using him as a villain. And this is one of those scenarios where I'm actually perfectly fine with Ben Reilly being Chasm. I have never really personally liked Ben Reilly as a character, not because I think he's a terrible character, but just because I still have that bad taste in my mouth from the Spider Clone saga from back in the 90s. So Ben Reilly has always been a poison pill to me when it comes to accepting him as a character. And even after he just settled into the Scarlet Spider persona and was no longer operating as Spider-Man, it took a while for that character to grow on me. So you'll have to forgive me if I don't have the same bit of nostalgia for this character that other people do. The character I am perfectly okay with, though, is Madeline Pryor. I love Madeline Pryor. I think she's a great character. She's had a lot of terrible things happen to her, and if you aren't familiar with her as a character, Madeline Pryor is a clone of Jean Grey. And while she's a clone of Jean Grey, it's more specific to point out Madeline Pryor is a clone created by Mr. Sinister. And a lot of times when people think about the character Cable, who is the son of Cyclops, a lot of people tend to mistakenly think that he is also the son of Jean Grey, when in fact, he's the son of Madeline Pryor. More specifically. I mean, with her being a clone of Jean Grey, you can technically say he has two moms. I feel like Madeline Pryor has been trying to gain her own agency and find her place in the world. And while I do kind of feel like they're playing flip-flop back and forth with her, like at first they kind of make it seem like she wants to be a good guy, or at least being given the opportunity to be one, it also kind of seems like she's more than willing to go back to her old bag of tricks as the Goblin Queen. But hey, sometimes things aren't black and white. There's tons of shades of gray in the middle before you get to that black and you get to that white. And I feel like characters who are in the gray area tend to be more complex and more nuanced, and it opens up the way for more interesting stories, regardless of how I feel about whether that character is a good guy or a bad guy. And just like with Madeline Pryor, same for Ben Reilly. I feel like this dark web story arc that's coming up is a way for people who, like me, aren't that interested in just regular old Ben Reilly trying to be Spider-Man. Maybe this is an opportunity to tell a story about this guy that might actually make people more interested in the character than before, and who knows, maybe this time it might actually stick. Because honestly, up until recently, I just have yet to see anything that has made me feel like Ben Reilly is anything special beyond just being another Spider-Man. Dark Web could potentially put Ben Reilly in a position where maybe he could piggyback off of some of that success that Venom had, being a villain and rival of Spider-Man. Maybe Marvel can catch that lightning in a bottle a second time in the Spider-Man universe with Ben Reilly. But anyways, if you wanted to know what was going on with Ben Reilly, why he's trying to kill Spider-Man all of a sudden, now you know. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about Amazing Spider-Man number 14. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.